Welcome everybody to our Professional Services Forum event, Succession and Stakeholder Management, a conversation with Chicago's family business leaders. We're excited to have an expert panel here today to share all of their knowledge with you. And we are also very grateful to our forum sponsor, Duchess Watt Capital Management, and our presenting sponsor, KPMG, for their support of the Professional Services Forum and for this event each year. So I'm going to hand things over to Joe Rock from KPMG to start us off with some welcome remarks, and then we'll get into our conversation.
Great. Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to our virtual forum event, Succession Stakeholder Management, a conversation with Chicago's family business leaders. I'm Joe Rock. I'm the managing partner of KPMG's Milwaukee office, part of the leadership team of our Chicago hub, and an audit partner with significant experience serving large family businesses in Illinois, Wisconsin, and Michigan. I'm excited to welcome you for a discussion on the unique challenges met by Chicago's family business leaders and how they manage stakeholder relationships and family dynamics to thrive from generation to generation. I'm thrilled to feature Eric Reeves, Managing Director and Head of Private Capital Investments at Duchess Watt Capital Management, and a co-chair of the Executives Club Professional Services Forum as today's moderator. He will be leading a discussion with Stephen Baird, President and CEO of Baird & Warner, Adrienne Pope, Managing Director of Riddell Rentals, LLC, Julie Smoliansky, CEO of Lifeway Foods, and Jennifer Pendergast, Clinical Professor and Consultant of Family Enterprises and Faculty Director at the Center for Family Enterprises at the Northwestern University Kellogg School of Management. Each of these speakers brings a wealth of knowledge and experience today, and I would like to thank them for being here with us. Before we get started, I'm going to show you a few ways to interact with the panelists throughout the event. There are a number of ways to ask questions and chat with your fellow attendees during the session. Here's how you can do this. We encourage you to use the chat feature throughout this discussion to share thoughts with your fellow participants. We'll have time for audience questions at the end of our meeting. Use the Q&A if you would like to ask one of the panelists a question. You can also use the raise your hand feature if you would like to ask a question to the speakers. If you use this option, we can bring you on video briefly to ask your question in person. Thanks again to all of you for joining us today, and thank you to our panelists for taking the time out of your day to share your insights with us. I'm going to turn it over to our moderator, Eric Reeves, to kick off this discussion.
Thank you, Joe. I really appreciate that. Good afternoon, everyone. I hope you're having a beautiful day. We have a short amount of time here for a very juicy topic. And so I'm going to do my best to moderate us through this efficiently. Just a little bit about our schedule. As Joe said, we're going to do some welcoming remarks. We have some introductions. We'll have a moderated discussion. We'll save some time for Q&A at 4:40. We'll have some closing remarks, and we'll conclude promptly at 5. So without further ado, let's start with introductions. Adrienne, why don't you start us off and tell us who you are, what you do, maybe a new hobby or habit you've picked up during shelter in place.
Hi, my name is Adrienne Pope. I'm the Managing Director and second generation of leadership of Riddell Rentals, LLC, which is a property management company. We own and operate properties throughout the south side of Chicago. In terms of a new hobby during sheltering in place, I bought a bike and have gone back to my roots of bike riding. I loved bike riding as a kid, but somehow as an adult never owned a bike. And so I bought a bike and I'm now biking around Chicago.
Fantastic. Steve, what are you doing these days and what are you up to?
So I run Baird & Warner. We do everything around buying and selling a house. We have a brokerage company, a mortgage company, a title company, and we have about 3,000 employees in 40 some locations around Chicago. And like Adrienne, I have returned to bike riding. I stopped because I had some problems with my back and went out and bought a bike, and I ride it every couple of days, and that's been a great part of COVID for me, is going for those bike rides and going for bike rides with friends.
And Jennifer, how about you? You're on mute, Jennifer.
Sorry about that. I have done so many of these, you would think I would know better. I am a professor at Kellogg, and I run the Center for Family Enterprises there, which has been around for about 20 years doing MBA programs, executive education, conferences, research, so all kinds of different things. And appreciate being part of the panel with people who live this every day as opposed to something I study. I have not started anything new other than a completely failed attempt at gardening, to be honest, but it was worth a try. But I have gone back to both playing tennis and cooking, things that I couldn't do when I was on the road all the time. So it's really nice to have the opportunity, like you, that are getting back to biking, to do some things that we love to do, but maybe weren't taking the time to do.
Great, thank you. And Julie, and I love your background, Julie. Why don't you give us some of what you're doing today and any new hobbies you might have picked up?
Yeah, so I'm the president and CEO of Lifeway Foods, the Keeper company. And I'm so happy to hear all these people are partaking in like healthy lifestyle, good self-care choices. That's what my mission is, to help people do that. Let's see, something new I've been doing. Well, I started writing my memoirs. I've been writing, I've been aiming for 700 words a day, but I don't always hit it, but at least I've been working on that process. So it'll probably be like another decade. I wouldn't hold your breath. The next pandemic, maybe the book will come out, but that would be my second book.
800 words a day times a decade is a long book. So I think you better be a little more efficient. Okay, well, let's kick this off, guys. We are all impacted by COVID. I know that, we all know that. We're not going to specifically delve into COVID. But as you might imagine, a lot of the things that we're thinking about these days, especially around succession planning and stakeholder management, have definitely been impacted by COVID. And succession planning is something that is top of mind for family businesses. It's applicable for business leaders at the top of any organization. But Steve, I guess, what do you think family businesses do differently with their heir apparent that traditional businesses might be overlooking, and has the onset of COVID impacted that in any way, whether it highlighted certain things or put you in different directions than you might have otherwise been heading?
So I can only answer one part of that question, because most of my career has been working in a family business. So I don't really know what other people do outside family businesses, but I can tell you what we've been doing. And we've been, my focus has been on building a management team and building people who could potentially be the next generation. And it doesn't necessarily mean a family member. It would be great. We've done that 4 times. But the most important thing for us is that you get somebody who's really capable. And so I want to have those people in place for a while at the company, so you can see who they are and they're comfortable in our culture and our company, and are going to lead the company in the way we want it to be led in the next generation. So that's what we're trying to do. And I don't think COVID has really affected that at all. It's the same process. We've been through, we've been around for 165 years. So we've been through a lot of crazy things, including the Chicago fire and a couple of world wars. And so, but COVID, it's obviously affected our business some, but not this particular process.
Really, I really like that. If I were to say it differently, it sounds like your family business, your family culture, you have a set of values that have stood the test of time, and you're continuing to stick through your knitting during this time period as you manage your business and look for succession planning in the ways you have in the past. Is that an accurate reflection of what?
Yeah, and I think the key thing I would say was the most important thing from one generation to the other is to pass it between capable people.
Yeah.
People always focus on the fact that it ought to be a family member or relative.
Mm-hmm.
It's much more important to pass it to somebody who's capable. I would like it to be a family member, but number one is that it's capable, because if you pass it to somebody who isn't, or a group of people who aren't, the business is going to eventually fail or go away. And so that's our number one focus.
Steve, I want to put a pin in that. I like that thought of the having a thought of who the transition is going to be to, whether it's family or not. And I do want to come back to that. But Julie, things don't always go as planned, as you well know, for succession planning in a family business. And so you might not always have the time to grow into the seat. And so why don't you talk about succession planning a little bit from your perspective?
Sure. Well, I grew up in my family's business. I was, 4 years old the first time I took a price tag sticker gun, and started applying those on food products that were, being delivered into my mom's grocery store. And, I grew up in the family business, and, a lot of the conversations that happen at the dinner table were school for me. And I learned so much just from having a meal with my family. That was, I think all of our conversation was around our business. And my father really empowered me, and, it showed me strong female role models and strong family businesses. Even one right here in Chicago, Christy Hefner and Playboy. I mean, my father put Christy Hefner in front of me when I was 18. She was on CNN and said, here's a strong woman running her family business. And look what she's done for her father's business. And I want you to do that. And had he not done that, I don't know that I would have been empowered when the moment came when he had a sudden heart attack in 2002 and passed away suddenly. I was 27 years old, and the company was thrown, on top, on me. And it's a publicly traded company. So, we were already a $12 million business. It wasn't just a mom and pop little business. And that was a lot of responsibility. But what I will say is that this conversation is so important that we're having, because family business accounts for 80% of the companies worldwide. They are the largest source of long-term employment. They create 60% of the jobs, and 80% of new jobs, and account for 60% of all of our workforce. There is a strong payoff by investing in family business. And I'm talking both professionally as, people here tonight, that these are all of the people that kind of work to support the family business, consult with it, represent it. And research shows that large standing, even publicly traded companies that are run by families, they grow faster than non-family businesses. They're more resilient. They outperform market returns by several percentage points. And so there's a lot of great things that can happen if the business is run properly. And, there's some things that we've learned that we didn't do great, but things that we have learned, that I'm sure we'll get into, but there's a real strong benefit to investing in family business and the people who are in the family, even young generations that, like myself, when I was 4 years old, learning quite a bit that I didn't even know I was learning.
I like a lot of the themes there, Julie. One of the things that Jennifer and I have spent time on over the last couple of years is this concept of, in the family office space, the family world space, people say, if you've seen one family office, you've seen one family office, right? That they're not the same. But I think what Jennifer and her research and some of her colleagues are starting to narrow in on is that, family business is not new. As you aptly point out, Julie, family business has been around for thousands of years and has driven many economies. And so, Jennifer, what does the research say? What does the research say about family business, succession planning, and this whole concept of, the thing I said, put a pen in when Steve was talking of toggling between the heir apparent. Is that a family member? Is it a family business? When an outsider or a in-law takes over the business, how does that stay together over time? And so I've raised a lot of issues there, Jennifer, but I think between Steve and Julie, there's some juicy things there to dig into.
Absolutely. So first of all, from a my observational perspective, if people change their lens from thinking about succession to thinking about continuity, it's a whole lot healthier approach, right? Because, one of the early question you asked to Steve about what's different in a family business than a non-family, I think family has an opportunity to view this over a very long time horizon, right? With the assumption that we're going to be in this business for the long run, if that's what your family stated. So that means that you're always thinking about how am I preparing that next leader versus, what's the typical Fortune 500 CEO's tenure, right? They're not thinking 20 years. They're thinking about how in these next 3 years, am I going to make sure that whatever my record is looks good while I'm there. Families don't have that luxury. So I think the planning, the thinking about how do I walk my kids around? How do I show them examples early on? And to Steve's point, how do we state that we would greatly value having a family leader, but only if that person is well prepared. But what that suggests is if that's what you value, then you think about that ahead of time and you're not surprised, when you find out, oh, wait a minute, we don't have someone prepared to do this. Families are actually spending time thinking about how do we prepare that next generation of leaders. I love Julie's story of Christy Hefner. I got the opportunity to meet her and was just confounded by how could a woman be head of this business, yet how great that was that her dad had the vision that she could run that company, right? But there's research that shows, as an example, if you're going to generate entrepreneurship, so not just I want to be a steward, I don't want to lose money on my watch, but really try to grow something, that the best thing you can do is have someone absorb what you do. Walk side by side with you, be, putting the price tags on steps. So there's very real value in early exposure, which is tough in a non-family business. How would you know who to be exposing things to? So that's one area I think research shows. The other, shows that actually typically the generation after the entrepreneur can have a really tough time if they're not prepared. So how do you not, I think it's, not only a disservice to the business to have someone that's unprepared, but to that poor person who may not be prepared, right? So how do you think about how to do that? And then the other thing I would say is families are better at passing down stories. So when I hear next generation members say what helped them be prepared, it's that I didn't just know the what, like, oh, in 1975, we launched our first X, but I was actually given the ability to understand the why. Why did my family do these things? That's the values and the purpose and stuff. And I think non-family businesses can capture that stuff too. It's not just about key dates. It's about what were the things that drove us to make the decisions we did and how did we learn from those. So really, having a rich transfer of information and from early on thinking about how to incorporate next generation members. And by the way, those don't have to be the people that run the business, right? I always say, like, over time, and Steve's like, I don't know how many owners, Steve, you have of the business, but if you have people that are doing internships, that are having mentors, they're learning to be good owners. They're learning to be good board members. They're learning to be zealots for the family brand, right? So no matter what, it's great to have family members who are proud of being part of something, even if they're not, like Steve and Julie and Adrian actually running the business.
It's a great segue. That's a great segue.
Can I add a point about just a way I think about our family business? I think about the business being bigger than the family, meaning that the business has supported the family for multiple generations. And if we continue to make it healthy, it's going to continue to do that. So we focus on the issues around the business as opposed to what's the best thing in terms of family dynamics. And that's something I learned early on. And it's just an orientation that we have around our business.
Serving the business as opposed
Serving
to
the business. The
yes.
business is bigger than the family.
Yes.
And so if you think the family is the most important part and the business is secondary, you're going to have problems between the family and the business. Not that you don't have problems otherwise with families,
right.
But
that's very interesting. Adrian, you certainly have had a unique position at your family's kitchen table and at the board table, learning these lessons, a storied business on our Chicago South Side and other places. Adrian, how did you pick up those messages? How have you translated succession in your family business? And Adrian, I'm also curious to know how you translated that dealing with your employees, the broader family business, the stakeholders, the people who help you and your family run your business.
Indeed, yes. So, I mean, really, I got my start with my family's business as similar to Julie as a child, really taking witness to my parents working day in and day out, running their company. They had a huge emphasis on education for us. I'm actually the youngest of four, so it's fascinating that I, as the youngest, decided to actually take the reins, but my other siblings have wonderful careers throughout the world, but I took on the specific choice for that. But prior to actually coming on board, I of course went to college out east in the Northeast, and I did, you know, other careers. I did Teach for America in Houston, and lived and worked in New York and LA. And actually I ended up back in Chicago about 10 years ago when the fall of the economy occurred. And it ended up being kind of this confluence of alignment and things just, you know, sort of working out in the sense of where can I go? Where I'm not going to have a glass ceiling over me. And, you know, taking a look at my parents' business at that time, you know, they were also in need to, you know, sort of fill a generational gap. I mean, prior to, I pride myself in being a small business as well. I've come through the Goldman Sachs 10,000 Small Businesses Program, which is a wonderful organization to provide, you know, resources for entrepreneurs. And, you know, one of the key things that I realized, you know, stepping into the business was, you know, this true need for, you know, technology to drive them into that next generation. Prior to coming on board, my parents were still advertising in newspapers, and they were getting, you know, trickles of leads. And at this point, I lived all over the country and rented apartments all over the country and realized everything's online. So the first thing that I did was, you know, build them a website on WordPress overnight and get a marketing strategy in place. And so, you know, some of it wasn't necessarily, you know, having the chance to work exactly side by side with them, you know, all the way through my life, but I was able to take transferable skills from other careers that I had to bring that to the business and just to continue to reinvent it and reimagine it for the next generation.
Thank you, Adrian. That is, you know, a topic that I really would like to stay on for just a second there, and that is, how do you influence future generations? And maybe you can all speak to that, but obviously it's not a tough sell to introduce your parents to online advertising, but it is a challenge in family business to affect change, because, you know, the thing that you want to change brought you to the dance, but there's other things that are germane to business other than, you know, just doing what your parents told you to do, right? So how do you respond to that? Any of you jump in.
I was just going to touch on like the fact that, you know, just to reiterate the point that I always say that we're building a business, not just for this generation, but for all generations. And, you know, the key things that we talk about that, you know, are sort of like the acid test to our business is certain culture, things that we want to articulate and like literally speak and have this in our vocabulary, that, you know, there's issues around like respect and integrity, humility, passion, ambition. These are words that, you know, I share with my children that I want to instill and bring them role models and show them, you know, future, like, to whom much is given, much is expected. And I take that very, very, very seriously. And I think that, you know, you can navigate that for future generations and have many generations prosper from that cultural value by offering, you know, good governance, developing family leaders, developing leadership skills, you know, both within the family and outside of the family, and having that mix and being able to blend those, making sure that outside members speak the same language that you do, that we do in our business, in our family. And, you know, being able to do that storytelling, you know, it's so important for me as the sort of mother of this business, the maternal, you know, leader, the one who's been tasked with carrying on that torch. You know, I'm sharing family culture storytelling that's over 2,000 years old, that my ancestors carried with them from one generation to the other. That originally, you know, Kiefer was some small village in the Caucasus Mountains and was passed down generation to generation through storytelling, and that I get to now do that on a larger scale using technology, using, you know, all of the resources available to me, breaking those cultural barriers, breaking technology barriers, all of those things. You know, doing work, you know, just like Adrian had mentioned, you know, we brought in, well, for example, like when social media was starting, I was 27 years old and my peer group was doing MySpace, and nobody else was doing MySpace, but I put our brand onto MySpace and created a you know, page for that. And I don't think any business has ever done that. Then we moved into Facebook and Twitter. We were the 4th company on Twitter. And it was only because I was empowered to make those kind of decisions. And that's what my peer group was doing. And, you know, women dominate in social media. And that was just such a natural, intuitive thing for me. And, you know, I would say that it was like out of the survival, you know, that the skills that I've learned that are in my DNA to not only survive, but thrive. And I think all of that just came together for us. And that's what I would just instill in others to those key.
Yeah.
So Eric,
Yeah.
I think, you know, something that Julie said that really strikes me, it was also a great benefit in a way in the wake of her family's great loss, right, of your father, that you happen to be 27. So I have so many MBA students who, you know, their big question is, that's great, Dr. Pendergast, but my dad's never going to listen to me, right? I know we're supposed to have a board, or I know what we're supposed to do, whatever, but how do I get someone to listen to me? And yeah, I think somewhere along the way, families sometimes lose that sort of risk-taking mentality of being the entrepreneurial roots, because my guess is any of you on here, whatever your parents, grandparents, great-grandparents were first doing is not what you're doing now, because you would have failed long ago. So there's this entrepreneurial mindset that somehow people get, you know, resource rich and then forget. And so how do you go back to those roots, and how do you empower, you know, next generation members? So when I did some work with EY's next generation group, and you know, they said, we know about social media, we know about social unrest, we know about what workplace practices matter to our generation. And by the way, our generation is 50% of the consumers and 25% of the workforce, so it's probably worth listening to us, right? So the challenge of how you as a next generation member in a respectful way say, hey, I have an idea, and how to empower those ideas. Because I will tell you, with the research we're seeing globally, the biggest challenge is getting next generation members to want to come to the business. In China, in Africa, wealthy, successful families send their kids away to go to school in Latin America, and then they don't want to come back. They want to go work for Google. They want to go work for Eric and buy cool companies and look over the bridge like he's doing right now. But so how you make that case, and how you make the case for why, is the values that all three of you were talking about, to say you're part of something bigger. To Steve's point, the business is bigger than the family, right? How do you instill
Jennifer,
that?
yeah, and I think that that is something that's coming from the audience, Jennifer. That theme that you that resonates with you, I think, is resonating with our viewers as well. And that is, Steve, maybe you'll help me out here. You know, you're the business is bigger than family is trending on Twitter now, Steve. So you're going to be quoted. Jennifer, Julie, I don't think you're going to find it on MySpace, but if you check your Twitter and Instagram, you might find this.
MySpace.
Might find MySpace, yeah.
Right.
Let me comment about that, because this
so here's the question, Steve.
Okay.
So you said the business is bigger than the family. what are your wisdoms or tips on how to keep the lines, and I really want to hear this, the lines between family and business the least blurred as possible? And that's the question from the audience, to keep them the least blurred as possible. And my question is that the goal? To keep them as least blurred as possible?
Well, you know, our business is built around our family, and we talk in the company as if we were a big family. So this is an important cultural thing and an important way that we think about our company. But to me, the most important thing about this is just communication. I think so many businesses or so many families that I know don't talk to their kids or about what's going on in their business. Just start the conversation. It's really a hard conversation to start, but I started when I have two girls, and when they were in their late teens, they started out with these really awkward conversations where we would have these family meetings, and I would start talking to them about the business, and they didn't particularly like it. They weren't particularly interested, but over time they got to know more about what's going on, and I encourage them to be involved. And so it's really about communication. You have to talk about it all the time and make clear, you know, what's going to happen as much as you can. Sometimes you can't make it clear. You know, you're trying to decide it's going to be one of two or three people. You can't say it's going to be one or the other, but it's communication as far as I'm concerned.
That really resonates with me. You know, the family that I work for, the Duchessois family, we are led by a second generation leader who's been at the helm for a period of time. And as we're looking towards third generation leadership, you know, he started some 10 years ago saying the goal is communication and education. Like, if you continue to communicate and educate the family about what's going on and be transparent, you know, at least in my experience, what I've seen is that people will make their own choices in terms of how they want to engage with the family, whether it's through the foundation or through the core business or through other initiatives. But the key there, Steve, that I really like is communicating. I mean, it's you got to communicate often.
So one other thing I wanted to say about that is this balance between obligation and, you know, wanting to be involved. And in my family, it's interesting to hear Julie and Adrian talk about this, because in my family, the opposite took place. My father was afraid that he was going to scare us away. So I literally did not know anything about our business until I was over 21 years old. And he purposely did that. I'm also not the oldest. I'm the third child. I didn't even start in our business till my dad was 65 years old. So, but I feel very strongly that if you come into a family business, you have to want to come into the business. You can't be pulled into the business. If you're pulled into the business and you don't want to be there, it's not going to work. So how do you balance, you know, what the family is and and people feeling, oh, I'm obligated to do that, or I'm the obvious next generation, or whatever it is, versus what is the right thing? And that's, you know, I don't have the answer to that. And that's why I think communication is important. But letting people come of their own volition to take the role that they want to take.
Adrian, you mentioned your sister, you mentioned your family, Adrian, and you being the youngest. Talk about how your family addresses responsible shareholders or being a responsible stakeholder if you're not involved in the business, and how does it work both ways, you know, from your perspective and from, say, your siblings' perspectives?
Right. So once we decided that I really was stepping into the second generation leadership for the business, of course, we own properties. And so we did have conversations with our attorneys to do actual estate planning and to figure that out. So my siblings have an interest in the business as well, through, you know, I guess, heir. But honestly, I think it really does boil down to what Steve was saying, just about the importance of allowing people to come on board within their own volition. I think a lot about my path and how it led me to where I am right now. And gratefully, I'm able to give Big Sister, who's an attorney, a call if I, run into sticky situations that, she has the time to talk to me about, or the other who has been, done amazing things in sort of the world of HR and education. But at the end of the day, you have to feel like you can have that autonomy to operate. And so, the way that I understand it, each business, particularly if it's in it for the long run, it's going to continue to evolve. And, you may still have the same, core values or core function that you started with, but I think it's important for, there to be space for it to, become what it is to be within the current generation, and then, moving forward as well. So I think that's important, and I feel, really grateful that I've had that opportunity, with my company.
Thank you. Julie, you were going to jump in, and I went towards Adrian. What were you going to say?
Really beautifully articulated some of the, really important points. But, to kind of echo what Steve said, you have to really want to lead your family business, because it is not easy. It is one of the hardest to do. And that level of passion, you really have to want it, and like in a major way, because I really, it is one of the most challenging things that you could ever try to embark on. I think like backing into purpose is really important, because I think that like younger generation, millennials, Gen Z, they're driven by purpose. And if you can, find them a way to fulfill their own personal purpose within the business, that's one thing that was really important. Like for me, in my case, my father saw early on that I was passionate about helping people, that I was, really passionate about justice and access to wellness and health. And I wanted to empower people. I wanted to reduce suffering. Those are all the things that Lifeway is about. But when I was growing up as a kid, I thought business was bad and capitalism was bad, and, it was ruining the world. And like, I just had such a negative connotation around business in general. And when I started to see all the good that Lifeway was offering, the way that my father was talking about the benefits of our product, it naturally spoke to me about what I was really passionate about doing. And he saw that as well, and just, really empowered me. And what I would say is, like, even if the next generation does not want to take a management or leadership role within the business, they very well likely might still have shares in the company, and they might still be making and have influence on really important decisions, like who will be the CEO. That it's really important to educate the next generation on those issues, just at the very bare minimum, so that they can be empowered to make those really strong decisions to continue to allow the business to be prosperous for many generations. So I think that's really important. But I mean, I would never want to force, my kids into doing something that they don't want to do. They naturally have to gravitate. And if not, then we would be developing outside leadership to take those roles, but they still have to know what they're doing when they make those votes. They still have to understand governance. They still have to know those things. That's one of the obligations. But and one of the ways to do that, I would focus on development. I would focus on coaching. I would have family therapy. These are all the things we did not do. And if I could redo it, or what I would do for the next generation, learn about boundaries, really embrace personal relationships and cultivate those personal relationships, learn better communication, preserving those family boundaries, so important. These are some of the pitfalls that we fell into that we didn't really do well. And if I would redo it, if I was my father, I would probably demand that, some of those coaching, development, therapy, all of those things would be a requirement to carry the business forward.
Jennifer, I need to manage the clock a little bit. We're right at 20 to the hour, and I want to, there's some things that obviously Julie has just said that resonate with one of the questions, or relate to one of the questions from the audience, and that is engagement. And how do you, and I think Julie was giving some examples of how you can, engage but maybe speak to how you see families engaging generations in sustaining a long-term vision for a business.
So I think it all harkens back to that piece on purpose, because as I always say, when you say on purpose, it sounds like you're saying instead of by accident, but on the topic of purpose as opposed to on purpose, that no matter the age of someone, a conversation that's not about some super specific business decision, but is around what do we hope to accomplish through being in business together, is something that you can engage people at a fairly young age. And so I think taking back to that concept of purpose and opening that as a dialogue as a family can be really productive. I recently did that as an exercise with a large family, and it was kind of fascinating. Coming through COVID, they said, wow, all these people that work for us, we're so grateful because they're the ones that are on the front lines every day putting themselves at risk. And they started thinking about this whole concept of being a family of families and what their family owed to these people. And should they be thinking harder about how to support and give back to those people? And that all came from this next generation, none of whom had worked there, because they thought more broadly about what was the purpose of this organization was to employ this family of families. So I think having that conversation, and what do we want the purpose to be going forward? Is it to employ family members? Is it to create wealth for us? Or is it to create strong communities? Is it to have a brand that we're proud of? You know, in Adrian's case, is it to make sure there's fair and affordable housing available for people? Or Julie's case, you know, healthy products, healthy lifestyle. But those things are next generation people, to the point Julie made, that's what they care about. They don't care about as much the financials. So how do you make, I always think that the family purpose is like this circle, and then you have all these little circles that are the individuals, and you better hope they overlap, or those people are not going to be that excited to come to the table. So how do you create a purpose that is engaging to people and inspiring to them? I think that's how you get them to be involved, and that can happen pretty young.
Jennifer, have you seen other families use, not therapy is the wrong word, but maybe psychologist or therapist, or using a third party to be a segue or a venue to a conversation to bring the family together or to talk about this long-term visioning? And if any of you on the phone or in the audience have, please let us know.
Absolutely. I think one of the challenges is if you have a patriarch or matriarch standing up there and saying to a next generation, tell me what you think, it can be pretty daunting, right? Because what if I'm going to say something and it's not what Adrian thinks, right? Maybe that's not okay, or not what Steve thinks. So I think a facilitator is great on that. One of the other things I was just thinking about is I've been referring to him a lot. So there's probably a lot of people listening that know who Jonathan Haidt is. Jonathan Haidt wrote Coddling of the American Mind, wrote The Righteous Mind. He's a professor at NYU at Stern, and he talks about how divisive our society has become recently on political lines. He has a platform, that a nonprofit that his work is a foundation of, called Open Mind Platform. And it's about how you understand the point of view that someone else is coming to the table. And as opposed to trying to be heard myself, understand, well, why would Julie feel that way? And where did that come from? And how do I relate to that? And I think there's tools like this that are based in psychology and some in organization psychology around how do you come to consensus and bring people who are very separate apart. And any family relationship's already a minefield, right? Because you have some preconceived notion of who this person is. So I think getting support, you know, from either tools or people around how to better understand differences, particularly because I think one of the dings on sort of post-millennials is they're very black and white, and they're not going to come to consensus. They're going to take a stand, and they're not going to be willing to listen. So how do you overcome that part of it? I think sometimes takes some outside support.
Jennifer, I don't know if this is Zoom and COVID that gives me this bravery, but I know if I had this thought that others did. Did you say his last name was Haidt?
Yes,
That's unfortunate, but the pronunciation.
H-A-I-D-T.
Correct. I just wanted to make that clear for folks that it was H-A-I-D-T.
And then he's phenomenal. TED Talk stuff that he's done. Yeah, but you know, Eric, that's so weird. Until you said that, it never occurred to me that
yes, right. I said, well, he had to be compelled in life to do nothing but make change in a positive way.
Exactly.
Right. And so the audience is active on chat, which I enjoy. And so please, it is officially open for Q&A. And as a result, that's going to cause us to bounce around. And again, we have limited time. And so I'm going to do that. The next question up is, how do families utilize boards of directors? And by that, non-family boards of directors. Now, Julie, you're at a publicly traded company. Steve and Adrian, you're privately held companies. I don't know if you have board of advisors or directors or how you use them, but let's go in that order. Adrian, Steve, and then Julie.
I would say that we are still very much so in the formation process of that. That is one of the key elements that I learned in just my education, the importance of establishing a board of directors. I would say that I have, reluctantly pulled my siblings into it, given their expertise in varieties of areas, as well as having just, great friend networks across so many different sectors. I mean, I have friends that literally, work in the startup world and the tech world and whatnot, and I'm able to pick their brains, but it's way more informal than it probably should be at this stage. So that is something I look forward to getting more established.
Steve?
So when I took over the company over 25 years ago, my father had a small, very close friend board. And I made the decision that we needed a bigger outside board. And it took me probably 4 or 5 years to find the right people in the right situation. And I've had a terrific board of directors. I think, I say we have a better board than I deserve, because I've got some really top people on my board. And and several of them have been on my board for 20 years. And we have a very formal process. We meet once a quarter. I pay the directors, they have responsibilities, they have minutes, the whole thing. And I will tell you, I've been meeting with them for many, many years, and every single meeting, I come out of the board with some interesting perspective or idea. It amazes me that even after all this time it does. I recommend to everyone have an outside board of directors.
Julie?
Yeah, I totally agree. I mean, we're publicly traded, so our process has been more formalized for a long time. I mean, all I know is working with my board quarter after quarter, decade after decade, hopefully for many, many more generations. But, developing that good governance, oversight from an outside outside group, like a board, an outside board, to be able to separate business and from family was really important, and that helped. I think in our business, kind of helped reduce the opportunity for like hidden agendas or let's say infighting between, let's say myself and my brother, or, at least in my experience, there was a little bit of like a patriarchy kind of vibe that was happening, and the board really protected me and supported me. And I think, that was really important. But overall, I think the board has helped the family navigate some of these really challenging times and moments, and empowered, me to push some of these really important, next pieces for our business, and then the important things to make sure that our business continues to go next generation.
All right, I'm managing the clock. We have about 10 minutes and we have 3 questions. Julie, thank you for that. And I want to stay on this one with you because you're a publicly traded company. I think you might have to deal with these issues of social justice and unrest over the course of the last summer, for example, a little differently than maybe some of the privately held businesses. There's that. There's also, Julie, as you touched upon it, and I don't want to step over it. I want to double click on it. The role of women in business and stepping into leadership that I, at least in my experience, have found family businesses deal with. So there's 2 sort of there's the racial, social justice, and I'll add to that economic justice issues that have come over the course of the summer. And then second, not in any order, but there's also the realities of being a woman in in by and large patriarchal family-founded businesses. So as quickly as you can, because now I have 9 minutes, why don't you talk about some of that? Put it in play.
I mean, I view this time as a portal and an opportunity for change and an opportunity for me to be able to lead and push for that change and be supported in a way that if it was 10 years ago, I couldn't have done the same thing. So for example, when I look at everything that's happening, I thought, it's so challenging. There's so many things. How can I help? What can I do? And I started to look at the things that I could control. And what I could control was nominating another woman and a Black woman to my board. And that's what I did. I nominated Dory McWhirter. I think probably everyone in this room knows who Dory is and loves Dory and appreciates Dory for everything she's done for the community in Chicago, for women, for Black people. And those are all the things that, we really admire in Dory, and why I nominated her and why she, unanimously was brought on. And, I'm so proud of that, because I think like 1.5% of, board members, and somebody might know the exact number, are African American. So, for the fact that I was able to be in that role to nominate her and for the board to bring her on, I hope that other companies can, continue, join me in that process. But yeah, I think now I'm in a position where I am empowered, and I'm obligated to push through as many barriers as possible and break as many ceilings for as many people as I can.
I would like, if anyone else on the in the panel would like to jump in there. I have one more question, unless there's more on that topic.
I mean,
Okay.
I can speak a little bit to it. I just with everything that's gone on in 2020, I think it's been a wonderful opportunity for everyone across the board, businesses, individuals, to step back and assess, just like, who are we and how are we living in this world? How are we operating in this world? And I mean, particularly, even though I'm a small business, very much so privately owned, we felt the need to put a statement out and, just to, let our clients know, this is who we have been as a Black owned business. And, as always, these are issues that have been quite important to us. We are, looking forward to there being real change now that can come from these. And so, it's been fascinating to sort of know the legacy and know the history of my parents and how they got started. And then to also be in this just, honestly, amazing time of opportunity and possibility. I feel really grateful and blessed to be a business leader at this particular point in time.
And Eric, can I just make a really quick comment about something Adrian said? Family businesses tend to be a little quieter. And what I've found over these past few months is people feeling compelled or being pushed to the public stage to make a statement. What happened around the protests this past sort of early summer was, for many family businesses, the first time they actually made a public statement on anything. And, I think that's courageous. I think it's really important. Julie started out by citing all those statistics about the value that family businesses generate in our economy. It's a platform to have a voice, and family businesses tend to be more values driven. So I'd encourage people out in the audience, to take advantage of that platform you have to make a difference. Because the other thing is, and Edelman's Trust Barometer will tell you, you're about the only sector of the stakeholders that are actually trusted by the consumers. So politicians aren't trusted, no one's trusted, but family businesses are trusted. So if you say things, people will listen. And
they employ the majority of Americans.
Exactly. So everybody's working for you, they're watching you. So you've got a platform, and I think an obligation to stand up for what
and Julie, you're visible and you're public, and so it does, and it makes sense, and I applaud that. I really do, and Dory is great. And, but I am highly focused on privately held businesses having that voice at the table as well, because family business is everything in this country. I mean, it's what's going to get us out of this mess that we're in and back on our feet. I believe that as sure as I'm sitting here. We have 4 minutes left. I have one more question that I'd like to pose to the group from the audience. I'm combining two questions, and that is, how do you prepare to suit up? What does a family member do to take the field? Do you require outside experience? Do you require a certain level of education? Everyone in the family business, I would presume, has the right to work in the business, but not everyone has the right to lead in the business. How do you think about that? As our final question, maybe I'll give each of you 45 seconds to answer it, and then I'll turn it over for our sign off. Steve, I'll start with you.
Mine's very simple. Obviously we know who the family members are, and we've had many family members in the business. I think it's that you want to come to the business and you're interested in being in the business, and you're going to make an effort, and you're not going to come in and feel that you're entitled, that you're going to earn wherever you are and show people that you can work hard and do a good job. I think that's actually the most important thing when you come in, is that you don't show some level. You actually have to be almost more humble about how you approach it and prove yourself. You actually have, I think, a greater obligation to prove yourself than if you were just a regular employee.
Adrian?
I would say it's, obviously having the interest, but also really the grit. A lot of, entrepreneurialism from what I've witnessed from my parents, and even within my own tenure of what I'm doing, is just having that stick-to-itiveness. And so I think that is important. I would also say that therapy helps. I always kind of joke around that I'm the child that was able to step into what mom and dad were doing because I had, taken therapy, at some point. And so even though we didn't necessarily have family therapy sessions, I had my personal ones. And I actually, think it helped to just draw clear boundaries and be really clear in understanding what I'm doing and, how we're operating. So, I think it's good to have, that balance of, working towards a goal, but also, figuring out a way to do it in the most, compassionate way that really honors a legacy.
Jennifer, and then Julie.
So I'll make it quick. I just put in the chat an article I think everyone should read by one of my colleagues, Yvonne Landsberg, called Tests of a Prince. It's from Harvard Business Review. It has some great insights in it. But one of the biggest things, and I'm sure all three people on here, Eric, feel this, is you're in a fishbowl when you come in as a family member. Everybody's watching. They're waiting to see what you're going to do. That's why you got to work harder. You got to have the grit. You got to start from the bottom up. But I won't talk anymore. I'll just say read Yvonne's article.
Julie?
Yeah, I echo what everyone has said so far. And I would also say that the desire to be in service to others is one of the biggest things, like that, and then the combination of course, of like passion, ambition, and all the things that we said, but to be in service to others is
I like that.
most important trait.
I like that. I like that, Julie. With that final Q&A question there, we are at the end of our time. Please join me in thanking our wonderful panelists for their insights and comments today. We certainly appreciate your time with us today. On behalf of the Executives Club, we'd like to also thank you for tuning into this conversation. We miss seeing you all in person. I do hope, and the Executives Club hopes, that you all are staying safe. We hope you can join us for a brief discussion following this program. If you would like to join and did not yet RSVP, you can contact Megan Chickero for the Zoom information. She will be dropping her email into the chat box now. Megan, thank you for putting the phonetic spelling of your last name in there. It's Chickerell. So now I know. I wanted to ask you all summer. We hope you found this information helpful to carry you through the rest of your week. Keep an eye on the Executives Club for more upcoming virtual programs. In particular, we hope you can join us for our next professional service event, which is on October 29th. I'm excited about it. It's going to be about wellness. wellness routines, building resilience, and how we can continue to navigate during this next phase of the pandemic. So those themes came up today, so I think it'll be a good conversation on October 29th. I don't have anything else. So have a beautiful, beautiful evening, and I'll see you guys next time.